Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the BOF Careers webinar series, Building a Career in Fashion. I am your host, Sophie Saw, Commercial Features Manager at the Business of Fashion, and I am thrilled to welcome Stella Jean as our guest today, the women's wear designer and founder of her namesake label. Thank you for joining us today, Stella.
Thank you for having me, Sophie.
In this session, Stella will share her advice and experience in building her career, and in doing so, identify some actionable insights that you can incorporate into your own career progression, and to help you also find some inspiration for your next career move. So don't forget to check out the 4,000 job opportunities currently available on businessoffashion.com/careers. As well as my own questions to Stella, I will put to her as many of your questions as possible. So please do send them through on the chat and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So before we get started, some background information on today's guest, and I will apologize in advance for my Italian pronunciation, so please bear with me. Stella was originally studying a degree in political science at Sapienza University of Rome before dropping out to become a model for the late designer Egon von Furstenberg. During this time, Stella decided to start making clothes and is a self-taught designer. She applied to the Vogue Italia Talent Contest, Who is On Next, qualifying with her third application to the contest in 2011 before going on to win the competition. She launched her namesake brand shortly afterwards, selling out in stores like Matches Fashion, and has since dressed the likes of Beyonce, Rihanna, and Zendaya. In recent years, Stella has built a sustainable development platform, Laboratorio delle Nazioni, for which she was appointed a UN Goodwill Ambassador. And she founded We Are Made in Italy, a diversity and inclusion consultancy platform and the first diversity board for Italian Fashion Council, here we go, Camera Nazionale della Moda, or CNMI. This season, she will return to the official schedule of Milan Fashion Week, having left in 2020 as the only Black designer on the schedule and at the lack of diversity represented in the broader Italian fashion industry. So, Stella, after all of that, we will rewind right back to the beginning, and I will start by asking you, what drew you to working in the fashion industry?
Having been born in Italy in the early 80s, I struggled with being so different from almost everyone I saw around me. Only Black girl in school, in my neighborhood, at swimming lesson. I was truly motivated to find a way to show people not to be afraid of different cultures, but to instead see these inherent differences as opportunities, and fashion as a tool of counter-colonization against any and all terms and forms of cultural segregation. I started out as a fashion model, as you perfectly said. And from the very first time I set foot in a fashion designer studio, I knew I was in my element, it was in my place. It was so clear that I was in the right place, but not in the proper role for me. And actually, I owe so much to a quick Italian seamstress I met during a fashion show, who was able to translate the fabric that I would drape either on mannequin or on myself, because I don't know how to sketch. So I began experimenting with my very first fashion collections with her.
So you just mentioned, you didn't know how to sketch, and formal training for a technical career like design is often deemed essential, but you are a self-taught designer. What is your view on formal training or higher education? Do you think it is necessary?
This kind of question to someone who's self-taught like me, it's pretty bizarre. So I would say, obviously, study as much as you can. But what has been more useful, I think, to me, it has been hours that I spent in the atelier, in the factories, with the weaver, with the embroiderer. This helps me a lot. This has been the moment that I understood what was behind these beautiful garments, so the meaning of them and the problem of making them sometimes, because we are used to pass a flat sketch and then we have the appointment for the fittings, but there is something in between that is the most important passages. So it's really important to follow everything from the start, from the beginning to the end.
Mm. And then in 2011, you won the Vogue Italia, who is on Next Talent Contest. What did you learn from this experience?
For you fully understand what I've learned, I must first specify that I've always been very bad in all matters related to science. Anything scientific is usually completely incomprehensible for me. Science and numbers, perfect strangers to me. While in school, only one concept was explained to me that stuck with me as if it had been imprinted in my mind, thanks to the strong metaphorical component it has. It is the fact that there is one element that more than all the other is indispensable for flying. Consider the flight patterns of birds, of planes, for example. So I'm referring to flight as an upward and forward momentum. The indispensable element to fly is resistance. Without resistance from adverse events, none of us can fly and metaphorically advance and grow. So before making it to the final round of Who's on Next, the door was slammed and locked in my face 3 times. That is to say, I failed 3 times, and having that occur was one of the best lessons that the member of the jury could have taught me. In fact, I will always be thankful for the most important members of the jury supported me back then more than many others. So Franca Sozzani, Silvia Venturini Fendi, Simonetta Gianfelici, and Susie Menkes. I've always thought there is no wall in existence that cannot be transformed into a door when you truly believe that to be so. When the time to submit a 4th time rolled around, the talent scout of the competition, Simonetta Gianfelici, said, "We understand that you are not lacking in tenacity and stubbornness, but if you really wish to apply again, try to bring something that is yours and only yours this go around, something that is unique. That is not to say you won't be rejected again, but if you are, at least you will have been denied with a story that only belongs to you." And this is the very moment I decided to share what I had until that point always believed to be my weakest and most vulnerable aspects. I decided to tell my story through my collection. So I fused batik-inspired fabrics, which at the moment represented my Black Asian roots. Haiti, my mom country, the first Black republic in the world, and a country that is extremely proud of its Blackness. I matched that side with the precision of traditional Italian tailoring, included my father often used striped shirt as a constant in my collection. As you can see, I always wear a striped shirt. And I narrated my family story through the optics of my collection. And the result was true multiculturalism and the second place at the context. So that collection was promoted by the late editor-in-chief of Vogue Italia, as well as Susie Menkes, as I say, and many other members of the fashion jury. When doing so, I think that these individuals saw more than just a collection. They would make a decision to listen to a personal story, and they made a decision to play a part in changing the course of my life. So from that day, my Achilles heel became my source of strength and my launching pad.
A question actually from an audience member, Tina, has asked, almost sort of on a flip side of that, that was you finding your voice and your personal brand and telling your story through your brand. Tina has asked, how do you find your ideal audience for your brand? So I suppose, how is it that you connected with them through this story?
You know, actually, there's no particular strategy, or there is no strategy at all. I just have a catwalk, and I use this catwalk as a book or as an article. I start to talk, to reflect myself, to reflect my story. And the beauty of multiculturalism, there was no strategy. So there was no specific audience, even because customers were not used to this kind of combination. The first time that they saw the batik skirt with striped shirt, people saw it like a bit bizarre. Now it's very normal, but at the beginning it was a bit strange, and it was something completely new. So it wasn't possible to plan a strategy and understand who would have been my ideal customer.
Just thinking back then to the talent contest itself, I suppose fashion schools and entry-level roles can often feel like their own talent contest. They are notoriously competitive. What advice would you give entry-level talent looking to impress and stand out from their competitors when they are beginning their career?
Maybe I might begin by calling for an end to viewing work as some sort of a race or a competition. Those who are on my right, my left, in front of me, behind me, are not competitors to me. They are colleagues. And if we are good enough and foresighted enough, we could even become allies. Because if each of us starts with our own work and our collection to tell our own story or trace our narratives without mimicking others, we would naturally become complementary forces that combine strengths, skills, and resources. There is no need for desperate and exhausting races to the podium. I think it's absolutely necessary to ask the fashion industry to include among its list of good intention the creation of a system alongside independence, one that supports emerging designers who prove themselves deserving of that support, obviously. It is also true that emerging and upcoming designers, as well as independent designers, must create a functioning system amongst themselves. Since it's true that everyone has more production, an example could be creating a system and uniting orders of raw materials like sustainable fabric or small parts and accessory. If done together, a totally different purchasing power and cost would emerge. It would mean finally replacing the term competition with the term collaboration. So unity, to me, will always create strength, especially when it's committed to an equitable redistribution of opportunity. As has often been said, there is no lack of a fair natural distribution of talent, but there is absolutely no equal distribution of possibilities.
Thinking more about that idea of collaboration and support, I should say, as well, in beginning out your career, often finding a mentor in that support network is very important. I know that you had one, not just in the list of people that you mentioned earlier, including Susie Menkes, for instance, but also a mentor in the form of Giorgio Armani as well. So how did you find that support? How is it that he supported you? And what advice do you have for others in developing a mentor relationship?
By going and knocking on all available doors. Also, always show your end with great humility and resourcefulness. On the other side, someone needs to open these doors and offer the time to lend an ear and to share valuable lessons from their experiences. All of my advice for what to do is useless if there is no reaction on the other side. So maybe mentors need suggestion, need some good reason to open these doors.
And I suppose as well, there are a number of sort of new networks, I suppose, support networks that are being designed, developed in the last couple of years, especially. And I wondered if you can point to any sort of support or resources that designers or fashion professionals might seek out in Italy or even abroad that you're aware of.
Excuse me, can you repeat this question?
Just wondering about any sort of networking or support resources that you're aware of, perhaps. I believe maybe even We Are Made in Italy is one as well in and of itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can find many. So there is no particular secret right now because you can find many networks. You can find finally this mentality for which we started building our own tables. So when we are not accepted, you find many collective, many movement, many group that can reflect also your values and your ideals, just to be in contact. And I think that the net And in this case, it's a really good ally.
We've had another question from our audience, from Francesca, who has said, would you say that your Haitian values influenced your creativity and your work ethic in your fashion career? If so, how?
Absolutely. They influenced my whole life since I think that my stubbornness comes from Haiti, from this DNA. There are people who haven't accepted any kind of change. And what I've always said is that I won't be the first to break such a lovely tradition. That's why whatever happened to me, I always thought about these great women of my life that came from Haiti, and the thought of their work and their tenacity never allowed me to stop or to say, no, now it's too hard. I can go further. I have to stop. No, if they did what they have been able to do, at least I have to try to do the same. So IT play a huge role in my work, in my life.
So thinking back then to when you were starting out your label and getting it off the ground, I wondered, for the sort of aspirant designers who are out there looking to start their own labels, what advice do you have for them in engaging the professionals around them, the networks around them that they need to speak to, like buyers, retailers, early on in their career?
Actually, I would rather advise buyers and retailers to dedicate a certain quota to emerging and independent designers in their store and their platforms. And many are doing right now. It's what many stores are doing right now, or e-commerce platform. So doing so would give a signal of discontinuity regarding choices that are too conservative for fashion. And paradoxically, fashion is synonymous with avant-garde. It's an industry that is characterized by a constant rush to break rules and transgression. Where we have it, I think that one of the biggest shifts to date would be to break away from the plethora of high-level status symbol logos, even though I understand that for showroom and buyers, garments and products that feature them still represent a reassuring certainty of sellout. I would propose to both buyers and customers that they go and look for a bit of transformation with respect to the main roads that are well populated and dominated by fashion conglomerates, counter the homogeneous totalitarian presence, and try having a stroll on the small paths being forged by independents, even if they are poorly lit and often badly connected. They are extremely fascinating and precious. So most of the emerging and independent designer begin from a principle of structural social sustainability, which in this case is obvious and direct, since the emerging ones frequently insist on working with small workshop artisans and businesses in their country, thus safeguarding them. So actually, it's not necessary for them to come up with the excellent sustainability roadmaps and learn all the 17 SDGs by heart. Starting with the human social sustainability aspect of independence and emerging designer, we know that for the most part, this group belongs to a very local and vocal generation with an intrinsic respect to the demands of sustainability. As such, there is no need for them to learn sustainability as a strategy, as it is already an integral part of their DNA mentality, because they are very same generation that took to the streets for Fridays for Futures, along with movements such as BLM, LGBTQ rights, Me Too, and many others. So do we want to change the world, support it, or for the most ambitious, save it? It is precisely here that we begin to do our part, supporting the businesses of these 0 miles. It is how we call in Italy something that is sourced locally, like homegrown, talented artisan who represent the real country in which we live. And why they will mostly never have a place on any prominent board of directors. But when the real members of countries speak, we have a duty to listen to them. Sorry, Sophie, this topic made me laugh because it makes me think about when my son said something related to this to me for the first time. He said, Mom, look at me, I'm not going to school because I'm going out to protest for climate change. And I responded, that's fine, I totally agree with you, but before you go save the world, make bed and turn off the bathroom lights.
Oh, that's a lovely piece of advice for your son, I think. So actually a question that's come from an audience member, from Ben, has asked, what drives you as a fashion designer right now? By the sounds of it, sustainability is definitely up there. And he says from, especially with the rise of sustainability and social compliance.
We work, we start our work with Laboratorio delle Nazioni, and we are talking about social sustainability first. And when I do my mission around the world, I've learned through many of these countries, many of these women artisans, that incredible roadmap for sustainability or production standards that are written by Western companies cannot be applied in these villages, in these communities. And one more time, it's like I'm assistant to some rules written by the winners, written by the big players for others big players. And these villages are not involved, and their real life, their needs, it's something completely different. Sustainability is something really trendy right now, but when I started, it was just about to understand how to cooperate. It's an international cooperation, and it's really, we can't have a rule for everyone. Each village has its needs, each village has its rules that you have to learn, that you have to understand, and that you have to apply and respect. I'm really far from big company sustainability roadmap, because I apply first to human sustainability. When someone needs to eat or need education or need infrastructures, you should start from it and then thinking about all the ethical process.
So how do you then balance the need for sustainability, which is something that a lot of young designers are also taking very much to heart in the work that they're doing? How do you then balance it with the demand of the speed to market at the moment? How do you find the right balance in your work with that?
Sorry, I've been cut, I think. Sophie?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Can you repeat the last, because I think that's the last
No
part.
problem. So I said, in terms of your passion for sustainability, which is shared by many young designers coming up, how do you balance that with the speed that is expected of designers today, and producing collections so quickly?
As I said, I won't follow the mainstream on this. During the pandemic, we have made many promises, no? And we say that we would be slowed down, that we would change our production. And then we all see that we are back to the same, exactly to the same rules. Creativity is linked to speed the same way that consumerism tied to ethics. So during the pandemic, we're all forced to slow down, and the throes of the uncertainty of the moment, we made a great promises, as I said. So many people would to maintain more human pace. And I, for one, I'm trying to keep these promises. We learned that nobody will actually die if instead of making 4 collections, they only make 2, or instead of making 250 SKUs, they make 100. This is not to say that a slower pace is not indeed a matter of life or death. In fact, it's very likely that by slowing down this greedy productive approach, more human lives will be saved. And what is more, a slower pace gives the art time to breathe again. By pressing forward at all costs, we run the risk that the earth will take the time it needs on its own again. So a creative idea is part of intuition, and it is the result of feeling and observation. All of these are precious qualities that take time to mature and cannot be simply installed with an algorithm or an app.
With all of the different areas that we've spoken about earlier that you're working on at the moment, whether it's your work as a designer or for the We Are Made in Italy, the Diversity and Inclusion Council that you set up, or your work in sustainability as a UN Goodwill Ambassador, what is your day-to-day like? How do you manage it?
I've learned to manage it, learning from the best. And as I said, with various missions in various low-income countries of the Laboratorio Nation, I've learned from the formidable women whom I've met and listening to. And I learned that sometimes it's simply a matter of keeping quiet and listening to those who are the best prepared in the world in terms of, like in this case, authentic sustainability. Listening is a key term, as well as listening to and respecting the breadth and timing of the earth in order to avoid its and our collapse. In the communities within which I work, sustainable practices are just what they have always done without the need for sustainability roadmaps. There is no great concern for momentary trends of performance indicators there. Learning from their age-old sound practices involves investing in the necessary mentality and exchange of skill between continents that yields through enrichment. It's what leverages the coexistence of a plethora of knowledge and experiences. This would lead to a bilateral and complementary evolution in which we can finally erase the role of savior, while simultaneously understanding that it's precisely those who might appear to be the most vulnerable communities who can and should become the world's most prominent and important allies. I started this work with the artisan 10 years ago, and obviously I'm very happy that the creative director of historical major brands have followed my example of putting the artisan at the center of it all. To me, the multicultural transition embodies one of the most efficient antagonists to greenwashing.
So you were saying about how people in other companies as well are sort of following that line of thinking, but I wondered as well, when you've got people who are working within your own team and they come in to work for Stella Jean, what is it that you look for in talent? What is important to you with the professionals that you're working with there?
There are, I think, some essential skills to me, some essential qualities. And I think that we can summarize everything in 6 points, more or less. So I like people who are not afraid to try new paths, and who are kind of bridge builders. So acquire the necessary skills to replace competition with collaboration and begin to view competitors as allies, as you say. The ones that do not succumb to the winning strategy. And I refer it as such because it is a strategy that always works of divide and conquer, but stay united. Be transparent. It's necessary to replace outdated communication strategies with your own narrative told in the first person. It's important to control and maintain the ability to personally manage the business in every aspect, not just the style. And as we said before, you should be a good carpenter. We need to create system at all levels, where the emerging and independent creatives do not isolate themselves. And when it's clear that those who have already achieved a great amount of success have no intention of making room for new talents and at their table, we must commit to building our own together. And that let's be brave. Don't be intimidated by the giants of fashion, but speak true to power when and if necessary. Remember that no matter how small you think you are, you always have weight and a voice. And as the African proverb says, even the lion protects himself against flies.
Speaking of having a voice as well, and being able to have that voice heard, I suppose this is something that you've shared before as well in doing by walking away from the official schedule 2 years ago and having a hiatus due to calling out the lack of diversity in the Italian market. And I wondered if you could share how you have seen, if you have seen at all, any improvement in diversity and inclusion in the Italian fashion industry in recent years.
We started this, I hate to say it, but sometimes it has been a kind of fight, unfortunately. And we achieved many results. And I'm really happy for this. As WAMI, as the We Are Made in Italy collective. This is a very sore spot because it means revealing the deceptive paradox of opportunistic multiculturalism as part of Italian fashion. Unfortunately, I must be very crude at the moment and direct, since after 2 years, despite the seemingly very high level of interest in the Made in Italy BIPOC designers who were brought to the forefront for the first time ever in Italy by our collective WAMI, there has been a great disparity between interest and concrete actions of substance. So the effective interest in Italians' BIPOC talents is now practically equivalent to non-existent. I think that a cover not being shared or commented by local fashion experts has never happened in the history of Vogue. So aside from those directly concerned by it, absolutely no one's shared in Italy. It didn't yield even the most basic comments, and it certainly was not shared on any national social platform media, not referable to the same media company. Yet it had been an historical step. This was the very first occasion in history, in Italian history, that Black designers made in Italy were featured on a Vogue cover, on a cover at all. This gives you the idea of the extent to which the topic of the real multiculturalism of the untold Black made in Italy remains extremely taboo in Italy. We are still invisible, and no matter if we are on the or a major magazine, we are still invisible. I think that's why I repeat so many times, stay united, stay united. It is derived from what can be considered the most effective strategy aimed at denying any request for equal rights. Indifference, it's a really strong tool. And in this case, is opposed by opportunism on the other end. Opportunism shared by some gatekeepers of fashion communication partnership on social platforms. Curiously enough, some of them have displayed such a pronounced interest in our movement that it can only be characterized as urgent. We can absolutely confirm that no longer than a month ago, someone has shown a real need and urgency to involve the Made in Italy Black talents at the representation level at any cost. So to have them present at events or diversity inclusion cocktail hours only guarantees the event organizer as a multicultural, a precious and beautiful multicultural photo gallery. It ensures the strategies to continue to nurture a theoretical Black imagery and to confirm of the role of privileged savior in Italy. What is truly offensive and mortifying is the fact that when we ask the same privileged savior, after having consented to their diversity inclusion propaganda campaign to provide consistent action that reaches beyond photos of the events, action that will allow us to have a real impact that aligns with the promises made since 2021 to us, through the type of consistency that links word to deeds and promises to a concrete commitment. Well, crickets, these regular abuses of power are so exhausting. Once again, after 2 years of fight, a professional lynching awaits for those who dare to step in their full power and tell the truth, those who share their experiences and who demand change. The clear message is always the same: don't you dare. Even today, at this moment, while I'm talking to you, Sophie, I'm risking a great deal. As WAMI Collective, we are risking that the September fashion show will not be held, since at the last minute, our most prominent ally and the world superhero of diversity inclusion events in fashion, after promising since 2021 to join forces with WAMI for September 1st live celebration of Black Men in Italy, after insisting to meet WAMI talent in person and obtaining glorious pictures with them at their diversity inclusion event, arguing WAMI talents and board member, this well-known fashion superhero supporting and bold promises have eclipsed. I know too well the price for telling the truth. Once again, I'm risking having my social account blocked. I'm risking additional racist-based death threats come to my children and me every time I open my mouth. But we should say in all of this, however, we must thank the individual who has shown his greatness with deeds throughout his careers, and as of today, is the first Italian major brand ever officially and concretely support WAMI Talents for September event, Mr. Giorgio Armani, the same person who allowed me to have my first fashion show almost 10 years ago, will allow now a whole people collective to show their work live during the Milan Fashion Week. So a consistent fil rouge. And I can definitely tell that his first-hand concrete endorsement means the word to us.
With the lack of change that has not happened in the last couple of years, then what would you recommend for an up-and-coming designer or a fashion professional? Is there any advice you can give if they come from a typically marginalized or underrepresented background to try and help them stand out in this industry, to have their portfolio seen, anything like that? A series of questions have been coming through in the chat function, including from Victor, who said, what criteria could you scout for as an emerging designer who represent the BIPOC community at Fashion Week? Is there any advice you can offer?
Don't be intimidated, because they'll become stronger. The moment that you are intimidated, they become stronger. The moment that they try to control you in many different ways, instead of stay united and stay together, we will all fail. So don't be intimidated by fashion supremacists. And once again, the concept of unity makes its way back to the main focus of the discussion. And it's absolutely fundamental. We are not islands. We must remain united, no matter how small we know we are as independent and emerging creative, or how far away from the palaces of power our voices may seem. It is precisely from the bottom that all the revolutions that have changed the world forever have begun. So not being united means allowing the most efficient boycotting technique to take place, which is the divide and conquer. Latin is divide et impera approach, in which the goal of the technique is to separate the group, as this will allow them to better command on one individual.
And in terms of then building out, as we've spoken about earlier, like networks and communities and anything like that, is there any advice that you might have in staying together, as you mentioned, in building out a collective? Is it, as we spoke about earlier, are there any resources or networking opportunities that you are aware of out there?
Don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to share your own story. Even if your story is comprised of failures, we need failures to success. if you ask me, one of the fundamental element to success is failures. So don't be afraid. And you owe it to the many that didn't stop in front of giants. So at least we should respect them, repeating at least their steps. But aside of it, I think that I would also like to share, if you allow me, Sophie, something that it's really important to, and then it's business related. So it's more technical, less. We are not talking about ideals and values and these other things, but it's one of my biggest mistakes that I feel like sharing as the most memorable to me, is that as creative and artists, it is paramount that we stop believing in the false notion that our job is to do exclusively the creative part and nothing else. Nothing could be further from the truth in 2022. What are the crucial steps that mentors and those interested in helping to advance our careers bestow upon fashion designers at the very beginning? In order, they would be as follows: obtain a showroom, then a press office. Above all, the key element stressed by all and the conditio sine qua non is to secure a producer. Press office, showroom, producer. Every designer has considered those three to be the holy trinity, ones that we sought out for our careers and our brand. And once you are fortunate enough to find and secure all three, more than likely you defer to the advice of said trinity, trusting fully in the respective expertise. New designer urged to understand early that we are creative, but there is no way we can stay abreast of the tedious, practical, commercial aspect of our brands, and above all, being able to manage all of them. As such, one might find themselves delegating the financial inner working of their brand to an agency within the trinity, or perhaps to a partner. A romantic imagery still exists that cajoles us to reverse successful fashion partnership, one in which the creative head often works alongside a person with whom they are emotionally tied to manage a brand. So new designer might find themselves believing that they too could operate in the same way as Giametti Valentino, Berger Saint Laurent, etc. The creative in this dynamic can always feel morally liberated from the necessary practical tasks, because we are creative, we are artists, and artists must be left free to create without the weight of laborious chores that could possibly drain their creative flow and acumen. I say enough of that movie. It is imperative that we as creative maintain the management and pulse of the situation in all three of these pertinent areas. I can personally attest that there are actually many tasks and roles to cover. It's true that so much, but it's all part of a profession that we've chosen, and no, is not possible to delegate everything. The truth is, even before trying to find a producer, we should try to find a managing director or an illuminating CEO. Some might find it odd that I would offer this as a directive, but solid administrative management should be first on the to-do list. So you have your creativity. It's what you carry with you between your two ears. It's a safe place, but we all know and understand that we are not free to create as long as we are bogged down with deadlines, late payments, and royalties. The second area to focus upon is securing necessary funds, and above all, to learn to manage them wisely and firsthand. And this truly is an hemisphere that creatives often neglect, because it's a topic that requires a certain amount of pragmatism and rawness, two characteristics that you will need a great deal of if you are going to put on the great show of fashion. So to recap, we have established that yes, we need funds, and stating that money is a necessity. It may not sound dreamy or give most people that warm, fuzzy feeling. You certainly cannot put that statement in a press release for a collection. But believe me, there is not a single independent or emerging designer who doesn't know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about funds that must be found, and you can ask many different interlocutors, institutions, luxury brands, private individuals, investment funds. First and foremost, a sound business plan is needed. Up and coming designer, talents, and independent designer are oftentimes operating way out of their leagues in order to make a collection. And as soon as it is complete, it is not certain that the same will be able to be executed the following season. This is due to a lack of long-term planning, financial acumen, and obviously not cash flow. A good CEO is not the person who is going to tell you, listen, we have to reach the break-even point into the season. That is not the whole story. However, realistic, necessary projection and the organization is fundamental, as it's taking control of all aspects of one's brand, from creation and distribution to communication and administration, everything. I believe that Generation Y and Z are already much more geared towards this type of management. For anyone who still has their head in the clouds thinking they can create all day and leave their businesses part to someone else, I would strongly suggest that they rethink that stance. You risk that all of your great ideas and innovative creativity will turn into a fragile chimera, a fantastic empty dream, if you are not supported by a solid administration.
That was some fantastic granular advice. Thank you very much, Stella. I'm conscious of time. So to finish off, I'm going to pull it back a little bit and would just ask you to wrap up very quickly with two quick questions about what is essential to working in fashion and then how one breaks into fashion. But I'm going to challenge you to answer each question in just a minute. So I'll start by asking, what is essential to working in fashion?
Bridge builder. Don't be intimidated by giants. Be transparent. Control and maintain the ability to personally manage your business in every aspect, not just the style. Be a good carpenter, we already explained it. Be brave and don't be intimidated by the giants of fashion.
Fantastic. And then finally, how does one break into fashion?
In this case, I do not feel that giving advice of this sort is useful, since I'm of the opinion that opportunities to break into fashion only emerge by having the courage to trace new paths with vision and unique and unmistakable personal narrative. It is precisely this exclusivity of intention that is the winning recipe. Therefore, the formula of success cannot be conceptualized, since it is unique and relative to each individual who has the courage to share their personal vision story, even what they have to say is unpleasant, or if their truth directly opposes the glamorous modus operandi that has characterized the fashion world since its inception. Using fashion to tell story of my multiculturalism is what I did from the beginning through my styling several years ago. And for the first time in fashion, I assembled men's shirt and with skirts, garments featuring bathing inspired, as I say, the north and south of the world in one shot, one look. Many complimented me for this daring exercise in style, but it was by no means an exercise of styling. It was the story. It was my story aimed at promoting multiculturalism and the irreversible and ongoing multicultural transition. More than a minute, sorry. I respect the timing.
For the first one, we were definitely under 30 seconds, so I feel like they balance out. Unfortunately, we are at time. Stella, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all of your insights, your experience. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you also to our audience for joining us today. Don't forget to check out the latest jobs available on businessofashion.com/careers. And also keep an eye out for more content and advice from industry leaders and creatives such as Stella. Hope to see you again.